I'm one of a group called the Rewinds. We were named by Audrey, by the way. Unfortunately not retreads, but former WBA presidents who started and grew out of the organization. In fact, we still needed to bond when the organization didn't exist for us anymore. And we have stayed in touch over the years, getting together annually for a lunch or a dinner, and just to reconnect with the former presidents. And Audrey will be very much missed from those groups, to say the least. Also, a lot of the Rewinds are amazingly out of the country this week. They're all traveling the world, lucky them. So I was asked to speak on their behalf, and I'm happy to say that. Many today will share memories of Audrey, but for me it was not only who Audrey was, and it wasn't what she did and how she did it, it was when she did it. It was a very different time for women in business in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was during that time that my early Audrey memories were created. Many of you probably know the story of the earliest WBA days even better than I. I must admit I really only heard it from others, because during the 70s I was actually living and working in Toronto, only to return to Vancouver at the end of 1980. The story goes that Audrey incubated the idea of an organization for women who were either running their own businesses or were moving up to middle management in other companies. She incubated it for quite some time. So typical of Audrey, she recognized a need, seized an opportunity, and decided that someone, her, would take on the task of doing something about it. Sound familiar? According to the memories of several women, an ad ran in a daily newspaper somewhere between 76 and 78, which said in part, "Are you interested in an organization to support women in business?" We now know the ad was placed and paid for by Audrey, and the resulting meeting at the Bayshore Inn, also arranged for and paid for by Audrey, hosted about 50 women who were indeed interested in an organization to support women in business. They were those women. What they didn't know when they arrived at the meeting was that they would in fact be the group of women who would be the founders of what was to become, to begin with, the Independent Businesswomen's Association. Audrey, you had a wonderful way of sharing a dream with others and allowing them to take hold of it with your guiding hand gently and sometimes insistently, ever behind them, moving them and that idea forward, and you can chuckle. By the time I returned from Toronto in October of 1980, the Independent Businesswomen's Association had become the Western Businesswomen's Association. I'd come back to Vancouver to open and run the first branch office for a Toronto-based company, and I suspect many of you will remember the business environment of the time and could probably share the anxiety I was feeling at the time. I had two strikes against me, at least two. First of all, I was a woman. And second of all, I was working in a field that was definitely considered the man's world. Add to that the fact that I'd been away from Vancouver for 7 years, so I had no support group, no network, very few business connections back into the business community. A heck of a way to start a business. The WBA and its members came to my rescue. I think I'd been here all of 2 weeks when I got invited to a meeting. And it was a welcoming, inspiring, and even comforting introduction to the businesswomen of Vancouver. Standing quietly in the back of the room, greeting people, was a diminutive woman with sparkling eyes and a powerful handshake. And I remember the handshake. And of course it was Audrey. She looked you in the eye, remembered your name, and engaged you in a conversation about the community around her. She was ever the quiet but urgent force driving the organization forward, and most of the time what Audrey thought needed to get done, got done. She was always so proud of the women of the WBA and of their achievements individually and collectively. The times, as many will recall, were different, and the challenges were the same, but the resources were more limited and indeed more difficult to access. For many of us, the WBA became that resource. Our personal support group, and we have Audrey to thank. We celebrated the achievements of each other and were there for each other. The WBA was a group of peers who recognized the business challenges we each faced, and I could certainly spend a while this afternoon recalling the number of times that the network created among us by the WBA played a role in our business and in our personal lives. In the comfort of other women, we learned how to run meetings, how to stand and speak about ourselves, to network with others, to open doors and share ideas, challenge stereotypes, and build bridges. And we got to learn from some of the best and most influential women of our time. the amazing speakers list, which was an endless source of some of the highest achieving women of our day. To many of us it said, "You can do this too." For myself, I can happily say that out of the WBA membership came my lawyer, my doctor, my accountant, my banker, and some long-time friendships that I treasure to this day. Audrey's foundational dream was nurtured by many people in the WBA, and it was successful because it needed to be. It was a time when attitudes were different, and women didn't get a great deal of support or recognition in the business world. The WBA provided the support and the recognition for us in spades. There was always a member to turn to and ask advice. It was a place to share at a business network of friends and colleagues where one had not really existed before. And it was better than any old boys club that had ever been created. It is somewhat surprising to many of us former WBAers that young businesswomen of today don't seem to feel the need for a WBA-type organization. Maybe it's because Audrey already broke the trail and set the mileposts. And maybe it's because she helped change the game. Frankly, from my perspective, they don't know what they're missing. We were so blessed. Our lives were changed and our circle so much broader. Our lives so much richer in so many ways, and the ripples in our pool continue to grow from the splash that Audrey made with the WBA. Audrey, from all of the women, the hardest part to say, here and not here, who had the privilege of having you in their lives, a simple thank you would never be enough. So just know that the great part of our individual and collective life journeys was inspired by your vision, by your actions, and by your friendship. Rest in peace, dear friend, until you welcome us at the back of the room for the next meeting.